Today's guest is one of the all-time greats, an absolute legend, and an artist of undeniable transcendence. We're talking to Grammy-nominated principal flute of the Cleveland Orchestra, my friend, Joshua Smith. We talk about his beginning years in music, how musicals shaped his ideas around phrasing, and the surprising accessory that led him to choosing the flute. We explore how curiosity helps him cope with the pressure of a 35-year career in one of the top orchestral positions in the world. We chat about his disinterest in perfection as a goal, while also wanting to play his best, how tricky that paradox is, and how he balances it all. We also talk about his lack of a clear, quote, formula, and how that actually helps him keep things fresh, all so he can uphold his highest artistic value, communication, which I truly think is the secret to his genius. I know this episode is going to resonate with so many people. If you're in a high-pressure performance role, or you struggle with perfectionism, shame, or the constant feeling that you have to prove yourself, or you're craving more creativity and inspiration in the journey of doing this music thing day in and day out, this episode is for you. I hope you enjoy it as much as we loved recording it for you. Hello, and welcome to the Mindful Opus podcast. I'm your host, Jo Zakany, violist with the Cleveland Orchestra, yoga teacher, and coach for classical musicians. Here, we switch from grind to kind in our artistic process so that artists like you can avoid burnout, ditch performance anxiety, and create a thriving, healthy life on and off stage. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Hello, fellow Opus creator, and welcome to episode 5. You guys, I have Josh Smith on the podcast. Yes, principal flute of the Cleveland Orchestra, one of my truly all-time favorite artists, period, end of story. He knows this. He's slightly blushing because I can see him on Zoom, and that's okay. He is not only the artist that I just truly aspire and look up to, truly, he's also an incredible human. So we're just going to have fun chatting with him today. And I want you all to give him a warm welcome. Welcome, Josh, to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
I'm so happy to have you here. I've been giddy. I've been thinking about it. And I was like, where do I start with this human who has the most to offer? But I do want to start at the beginning. I want to know, how did you find classical music and why the flute?
Oh, okay. I'm trying to backtrack to decide which came first. And I believe that it was the flute. I remember that decision. I guess that classical music may have been, I think there was an awareness of it already at this point. And I think that was because my parents had some kind of an interest, probably, I grew up in the era of a turntable and lots of vinyl. And I can remember, in fact, I just thought about this a couple of weeks ago when we played Beethoven 9, that one of my favorite records was a Philadelphia Orchestra recording of Beethoven 9 with Ormandy conducting. And I still have that vinyl. I got it out last week when we played it. And so anyway, those things were probably part of what I chose to entertain myself with as a kid. But the flute came along, whether or not I was super conscious of classical music as a thing at that point. I was 8 years old. I was in second grade. I was going to a private school, and all of the second graders were encouraged to pick an instrument. And there was another boy in my second grade class who had a flute. And the case that it was in I just loved the case. Like, I thought that what he was carrying it around in was really cool as an accessory. And so that's what made me ask for the flute. I don't even think I really knew what a flute was. I just knew that I wanted this thing to carry around. And luckily, fortunately, the sorry about the noise. Did you? I don't know if you can hear that the dog has just entered the room.
I
Um,
cannot, but we welcome all furry
okay.
animals onto the podcast.
Yes,
I have my cat hiding somewhere in a
indeed.
corner. They're all
I
welcome.
saw her on Zoom. Okay, so dog's gonna settle. So Andrew's flute case was my inspiration, and fortunately, the music teacher at this school was he's a jazzer, a woodwind. He specialized in playing all of the woodwinds, and so he got me started on the flute. And I guess that early on, I was playing jazz band actually. In fact, in middle school, I played the saxophone for a while, the baritone sax, which was taller than I was.
Hmm.
But around that time, so this is like 4 years later, I had joined a youth symphony program, which was connected to the public school system. And all of these things were incredible. In Albuquerque, where I was raised, I just was very fortunate to be connected to teachers and programs that fostered a really strong classical music awareness and excitement. And, for me, being part of the youth symphony was like being, like some kids being on a football team. And it was
Yep.
just like super exciting for me.
Yes.
So I found this channel to put the flute playing interest in right away. And I think that the music, I think you and I have talked about this before, the music that I was most aware of at this point was showtune stuff,
Yes.
musicals,
Oh, I
like
was hoping you would bring
yeah.
that up.
I think when I was at this in this age between my like 8 and 15, probably when I started really focusing on classical, I was most aware of, the great American songbook. And that's probably what my parents listened to the most. And those are the records that the Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday and Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Lowe. And like I was also in tandem with playing the flute, I was in children's theater and like learning how to, perform and learning how to, I guess now that I think about it, learning how to become vulnerable.
Mm.
And which is super important and something that I wouldn't have put into words until very recently, actually. But the idea of what it means to be a performer and to communicate with people from a stage was just part of what I did from, like 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
And it just, yeah.
You said some things that I just now want to go on 20 million tangents and I'm going to rein it in because there were so many things that I wanted to follow up on. But what I find actually really interesting, and you did mention that we've talked about this before, is that even though you are by many, many, many standards one of the all-time fantastic interpreters of classical music, and yet what shaped you wasn't necessarily being only in classical music. If anything, it was these external, jazz songbooks and acting. And I guess I'm curious, how do you think all of those sort of different than classical music pots served you in your artistic growth and maybe even still serve you today?
I think they absolutely still serve me today. And I think that my first really good answer to that is this idea, I think from very, very early on, like I can't even remember the beginning. I had a connection between language and music because of song
Yeah.
and because of like accessible, easy songs. Like the Great American Songbook it's delightful. The
Yeah.
lyrics are amazing. The tunes are so singable and like they're classic and pop and everything. They're still famous for a very strong reason, which is that they're just delightful and really good.
Yeah.
And I made this, I think what I'm trying to say really is that it was from those songs that I understood what phrasing was, that I understood what a musical line, the idea of phrasing was very strongly connected to speaking, and that when you are playing something that has no words attached to it, you need to work even harder somehow to transcend the sound of what you're doing in order to communicate the intent of what you're doing. And words will do that, just by virtue of what they are. But if you don't have words, you have to find a way to connect the music to a linguistic sense. And I think that I just like had that built in based on how I had started. And theater obviously was drawing a big circle around all of this and connecting those dots. The idea of like engaging with an audience, which is something I still don't like. I don't think of myself as, I guess I really never see myself as a performer in the sense of like, you know,
Yeah, like the
making
big frou-frou, like the big ta-da over it all. Yeah.
yeah. I don't see myself as a diva at all. And yet I'm very like aware of the importance of, well, I mean, the bottom line of what we do is to communicate. And the success of like whether we're good at that or not has everything to do with whether we're authentically believing in what we do and wanting to express it to someone else. And yeah, I think that I just was, without like knowing that that's what I was doing, I think I was trained in that from a very young age.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. And like what I'm kind of hearing you say is that because you were enmeshed in these ways of forcing communication, or whether it was like literally you're on stage communicating a character while you're acting, or it's connecting to music with words. And then you saw the challenge of, wait, I want that same connection, but I don't have language. So, yes, you're
Exactly.
having to work extra hard, but if you can connect to that deeper level, then you're still like, how do I say, like you are communicating, but just completely wordlessly, which is the power of music. But I think you having that specific intent comes across in every time I hear you. I mean, I've heard you do Debussy Afternoon of a Faun, I don't know how many times, like several times as long as I've been in the Orchestra. I've been there 20 years. You've been there 35. We're going to get into some of these fun like moments on stage here. But yeah, just hearing you continue to evolve with how you speak wordlessly has been really fun to watch, because I don't think you just sort of think, okay, this is going to have the same words every single time. When I hear you play a
Right.
piece, the same piece a few years later, you've changed the words essentially. So
Hmm.
anyway, that's my little
Hmm.
tangent, but does that kind of land a little bit with what you were sharing?
For sure. I think when I became a member of the orchestra, there was a lot of pressure for, I was in my early 20s and I all of a sudden had this, the big job. The my
Yeah.
only real like that's what I've done for my whole career now. And it has I mean, any of your listeners will understand that being in the Cleveland Orchestra carries this certain kind of like pressure to be performing at a certain level, to have, maybe I think what I'm getting around to is I think I started in with this belief that I had to have all the answers or I had to know the way. And like there was a way to play Afternoon of Buffon. And when I realized that, there were a couple of conflicting emotions around that because I think part of it was this sense of pressure, like I have to be an expert. I have to teach kids how to do this now. I have
Hmm.
to I have to be the best at this. I have to be even better than my teachers were. Like there were these pressures, but there was also this kind of like competing awareness that I didn't want to fall into a whole, especially as young as I was, I didn't want to have to play the standard rep and do it the same way every time because I thought it would be dreadfully boring. Um, and
Understandable. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think I had to make peace with. I think I told you a little bit before we started recording that one of the things that I find interesting about myself, but also challenging and difficult, one of the quirks is that I don't find it easy to talk about a process. I don't find it easy to talk about a method. And I think that part of that is a conscious awareness of not wanting to have a, like a known path that I will always follow, because
Yeah.
then it's predictable
Yes.
and I'm not growing anymore. Yeah.
Well, and that makes so much sense because when I think of you, ironically, your framework is rooted in, I think, curiosity. And when you're
Right.
curious, you're constantly adapting. So you have to have that flexibility. As soon as you come up with a plan, this is how this is going to happen. If you're curious, next time it's a little different. Can you speak maybe a little bit to how that philosophy, just sort of rooting, because I know that's something we've talked about before, how important curiosity is to you in your creative process. Like, what do you think that helps guide you in terms of, you said handling these pressures? And that's something I know listeners definitely feel. I actually have clients who themselves are in the beginning of their journeys, like newly principled, titled leadership, and they feel this pressure. So I guess my long-winded question is, where does curiosity fit into this? What can you sort of impart to those listeners who are sort of newer into it, and yet you've done this for so long and you've done it with such grace and eloquence and just mastery, in my
Oh,
opinion?
thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I think curiosity is what makes me able to get up in the morning.
Mm.
Um, it- I think it's what makes me, when I am challenged, and this happens a lot, like when I somehow feel like worried or tired, or just like, there are many, many times with any profession, but like I
Yeah.
certainly feel it in ours, that I just don't want to go to work that day, or I just don't
Hmm.
feel up to the energy that it's going to take to play Beethoven 9 or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it's going to be. Like, and I mean, I know that I need to meet those kinds of feelings with something that will like elevate me into being able to embrace the task at hand. And for me, that's just a reminder that I can be curious about what's happening, and somehow, and I think this does come from my training as like a young kid actor, is to respond to a situation instead of have like a reaction that's habituated or governed by a feeling, to actually be able to sort of like, in an objective way, respond rather than react, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
um and curiosity is what allows for that to happen. Like, the saying, I need to be curious about the situation rather than dread it, is what allows me to be objective enough to just respond to a different context, or any context, I guess. And since music is alive, and since, no matter what the rep is, no matter how many times we've played it, the context of how it's working on stage is always so different. Even if we don't really know how to express what's different about it, it certainly is different from day to day and from year to year.
Yeah.
That, like, very strong, it's such a paradox. I was going to say very strong subtlety.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, that's something that I just find really interesting, and that's what makes me stay interested, is to be aware of wanting to respond authentically within every context that is happening.
Wow. That's brilliant too, because you're not necessarily pushing away, like you just said, respond authentically. That means you're not tricking yourself into having to feel a certain way, which I think can be very exhausting. That's something I see with
Hmm.
clients, is where they think, oh no, I should be really excited about this, or I should feel not nervous about this. And it
Hmm.
sounds like you just meet what is happening with authenticity. And, that's actually, I don't know if you're familiar with this, like respond versus react. That's like a very Buddhist phrase. I think I read it in one of my meditation books somewhere. And It's one of the ones I've wanted to get tattooed, but we'll see if that happens. I wanted it tattooed on my wrist when I'm
That's a good
reacting.
one.
Isn't that good? Maybe we
Yeah.
should get matching
Yeah.
tattoos.
Yeah.
I'm throwing that out for like friendship. By the way, guys, he's rolling his eyes, but that's okay. That's like half our friendship. Um,
No, I wasn't.
just mild loving eye roll. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, though, like you meet, I wonder if that's how you have kept a level of, how do I say this? Like you've been doing this for 35 years. Like that is just so remarkable. When I think about that, I would think meeting what's happening moment to moment with as much authenticity as possible and with as much curiosity as possible allows you to kind of problem solve your own emotional state moment to moment versus the predetermined, this is how it's going to feel this time. This is how it's going to feel that time. Does that
Right. Right.
land kind of? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I can remember periods of time very early on in the career where I got like completely swamped by that feeling of this is how I'm supposed to be feeling. This is how it's supposed to go. This
Yeah.
is what I'm supposed to be good at even. And I definitely had to like work carefully to get beyond that feeling of shoulding.
Yeah.
We humans shame ourselves and should ourselves super easily. And I just don't think that helps. And I finally know that.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Can we pick up there? Because the shame
Yeah.
aspect is, I love that you say, I finally know that. I want to know how long you didn't know that. But also, like, part of what I think Mindful Opus's role is in just normalizing certain things that are happening and then also helping debunk things that aren't helpful. And there's a whole culture that has gone on for, this is just my opinion. You feel free to, not agree or whatever, but that there's been a lot of pressure to like shame yourself into your results. Like you're going to beat yourself up until you get it right. A lot of perfectionism in our field, a lot of like what Brene Brown calls the 20-ton shield, where, you're making artistic, creative decisions based off of protecting yourself from harm versus being your most authentic,
Right.
brave self. And along with
Right.
that comes this other piece of that inner critic versus inner coach, which is like very much tied into my frame. I don't expect you to know that specifically, but that's something I work very closely on with my clients is while you're holding this perfection, you're probably being very mean to yourself and shaming yourself. If you're letting go of that
Hmm.
perfection, you are turning into like more of like your friendly coach and you're sort of advising yourself with arguably more curiosity. So I just threw a bunch out there, basically starting from where you talked about shame. But how has your journey been in terms of really like letting go of shame, potentially letting go of perfection, unless you have a different definition of perfection, which is interesting too. So, how do you feel about perfection, the inner critic, and shame? Go. See, I can do a nice
So
rambling question.
and I can do a nice rambly answer.
It's okay. We got tons of time.
As I think we're already aware. I
No, you're perfect.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I don't believe that any of this really goes away. I think that the channels and the challenges that you're discussing are human, they're universal, they're important to work on and to struggle with and against and around, but they're not going to leave us, and they're a very strong, important, or they're I don't know if important is even the right word. They are just an aspect of being human,
Mm-hmm.
and we can get better sometimes, comfortable sometimes, healthier
Yeah.
often, but not always. Like I
Mhm.
think that's kind of the main thing that for me is really helpful to remember when we start talking about this stuff is I also went through a phase where I was like, oh, I understand the concepts. I like everything that you just said about what you're working through with clients with Mindful Opus. I'm 100% aware of and happy about. I think it's about damn time that kind of progress, that conversation is being had within our field.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think it's really important to remember that it's not just like you don't just work through these things and wake up one day and you're just like, oh, cool, I'm not a perfectionist anymore. Or,
Absolutely not. No, I call it being the
right.
recovering perfectionist. I'm like, hi, welcome to the recovering perfectionist club. I'm here every day, like new coin.
Yeah.
Oh, fell off
Yeah.
that wagon, starting again. I mean, it's just, I'm so, and thank you for clarifying that because that's also part of like the sort of the over positivity of what you read in these self-help books or whatever, where it's like you do these 5 things and your life is perfect. And it's like, no, actually,
Yeah.
you normalize. Tell
Right.
me if this is kind of where you're going to. It's like you normalize those moments of discomfort. You befriend them, you become okay with them being there, and maybe that's why they're important.
Exactly. They can be signals. They're messages for us. But and yeah, I can honestly when I'm especially when I'm grounded. But I think most of the time, if you ask me about perfectionism, my basic answer is it's not interesting to me. I have no interest in being perfect. And I have no interest in the concept of perfectionism. And I think I've felt that way for a long time. And yet, here I am, in a major orchestra with a major job and a major title, and I've done it for a majorly long time. And so, of course, there is the awareness of, a set of standards and a set of ideals that I am constantly, working within and to, so-called achieve. And we in this field, I think, talk a lot about doing it the right way and that the classical style has if you say I'm doing this the right way, or I'm doing this with taste, that absolutely has like a meaning that means the same thing to every single person who hears it. And which
Exactly.
is just not true. And it's not even interesting. So like the idea that there is some one uh, again, I expose, and I hope that anyone who like is honest would understand and appreciate what I'm about to say. The paradox of, understanding that what I'm talking about and also wanting to do my very best are like they're there all the time. And yeah, sometimes the wanting, the reaching, the yearning to be really, really, really good, or quote unquote perfect, whatever that even means, it doesn't really go away. It's something that fuels us and drives us and keeps us honest if we're able to also understand that it's completely impossible.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Well, and take this the best way, please. I don't think of you as the perfect artist because
Mm.
to me, perfect means that every single time it's going to happen kind of like copy and paste. And there's almost like
Yeah,
a,
yeah,
for lack of a better word, dullness for my
right.
particular taste. So I know that's not what fuels you. And yet it's just so interesting to hear how quickly, at least the way that you're sort of describing it, you can just root back into what matters. Like you're saying, I'm not interested in perfectionism. So the
Yeah.
fact that you're not interested in it means it's not like one of your top values, which is great. you know?
Yeah, but of course, I also like it drives me nuts when I make a mistake. It's like
Mm.
I mean, not always, and I've gotten actually much easier on myself recently, even.
Can I ask
But
about that actually? Oh, sorry.
yeah,
This is
sure.
because one thing I've been so curious about, we've touched on it a little bit, is like you now versus when you won the job. What are some of
Hmm.
the biggest differences that you see between those two very talented humans? Because you were
Well,
starting to
like
answer it.
yeah, I can remember like in the first 5 years of my position, sitting like finishing a concert. I can remember every single time that like a phrase went by and I cracked a note or something didn't work or I wasn't together with the clarinet, or like anything that didn't feel like it was like up to my standard, I would dog ear the page. And then after the concert, I would sit on stage for 5 or 10 minutes going through each of those and like remembering like, okay, what went wrong here? What went wrong here? How am I going to do this tomorrow? Is it going to be better tomorrow? And I mean, I think that in some ways that was good. Like
Yeah.
like I can't argue with that. I
Yeah.
was very earnest about wanting to do a good job.
Yeah.
But I think the danger in that can be, and I'm sure I went through a period of like where I had to realize that this was a danger, was that when you start following a path towards like making sure that things are going to work a certain way, you are not channeling energy into the big picture, which is the communication part. So like if your
Mm.
brain is like on, I am going to make sure that this note sounds the way I want it to, that's awesome, if especially if you're in a practice room and if you can understand how you're doing it and how you got there, that's even better. But if you're doing that on stage, and you're doing a whole series of that just minute to minute, I need to make sure that my finger goes here and I need to make sure that the A sounds like this and I need to make sure, then you're not really like communicating to an audience anymore. You might be sounding great, but you're not like actually playing music anymore.
You just blew my mind a little bit. I knew you would, but that's the way out of perfectionism is realizing once you're in that mode, it's not about them. It's not about communication. It's about
Right.
you. And then the
Right.
communication, it's like the
Exactly.
phone clicks and like the communication's done. Now it's insular.
Exactly. And it becomes then a matter of like what you're doing in those moments. It you might be doing self-improvement. You might be like making sure that your phrase has no bumps in it, or making sure that you're succeeding in whatever standard you've set for yourself. And those are all important for sure. But what you're doing is it's that Brene Brown idea. You're protecting something. You're trying not to make a mistake.
Yep.
And when you're trying not to make a mistake, which of course comes like we don't want to sit there and try to make mistakes either. But
Hmm.
however, that I sometimes do work with. That's one of the kind of fun things to do with a student every now and then is to just be like, just don't care, just do,
Just
just
do.
be, and just yeah, just let it go. And that's a really important place to be. So yeah, the idea that when we start falling into the trap of music as an obstacle course, which it can very easily, I mean, there's a skill set of very subtle things that we're kind of constantly running right in the background. But if we're trying really hard to make sure that we go around all of those curves in the quote unquote right way, then we're not speaking anymore. We're just being careful. And so yeah, I think that's the funny thing that always comes up when I say that I don't really have an interest in perfectionism. I think the next step in my brain is always, well, then that makes me more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And and yeah, that's scary and it's hard to make peace with, but it's the only real way to be authentic is to also be okay with being uncomfortable sometimes.
Can you share what you mean by vulnerability? I'm so curious about what your view on it is. What do you mean by it?
Oh, so many things. I think in this context, what I mean is being allowed to, like internally allowed, and also kind of like aware of some kind of allowance within the community. Like I think we need a little bit of feeling of safety in order to allow ourselves to go there. And that safety can be projected to us, but we also have to have it within ourselves, I think, first and foremost.
Mm.
But that to let go of the trying, to let go of the needing to be right or to be correct or to be the best or whatever it is, and when you can let go of the whatever, however those needs translate into making us feel safer, if we can let go of that sort of need for us, that certain kind of safety, and allow for whatever's coming up to just come up. I think that's what I mean by vulnerability.
Yes. Oh, and it perfectly tracks with our girl, Brene Brown. We've quoted her already today, where she talks about how vulnerability is I'm going to slightly botch the quote, but it's the birth of creativity and innovation. I know is part of what she talks about. So
Exactly.
that really tracks with what you're saying. And you can't really be vulnerable and creative and perfect. You kind of have to pick.
Right. And you can't really have freedom and safety at the same time either.
Ooh, say more. That's amazing.
Like, if you can imagine, so what do we do in order to feel safe? We build walls. And so when we have a wall built around us, sure, we're safe, but are we free? Nope.
Mm, yep. Yep.
And and that, if you explode that into whatever context you're talking about, that kind of internal tension between security and freedom is something that I think that will always be a fuel, and something that we as artists have to kind of make peace with. That sense that security is maybe, I mean, I think that that's something that young musicians struggle with a lot, is this kind of need to feel a certain way, to feel like they know what they're doing, or like they have a master of the instrument in a way that fosters security. And I totally get that. But the fascination with security, just like the fascination with perfection, well, I mean, it's the same thing. Those two
Right.
things are linked together, and they don't foster creativity
Or freedom. Yeah.
or freedom, which is
Which,
the same. That's the same thing.
yes.
Freedom and creativity, that those are the, like, that's what we are really reaching for. That's how we communicate.
Wait, so are you saying that your framework is creativity plus freedom equals communication?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, we have Josh's framework, ladies and gentlemen. He's copywriting it. Okay. Incredible. Josh, I could just literally talk to you about all of this for hours. And I do want to make sure to ask you about one other thing too, adjacent to all this stuff, because I think it supports it in a different way. So, one of the many blabber talks that we've had throughout the years involves yoga and meditation. It's not something I knew you were into. It was sort of one of those like, oh, wait, you're into this too kind of moments, if I recall, particularly like our mutual love of yoga nidra. I know you've sent me some things. Side note, do you remember doing yoga on Yoga Download in like an airport? In where was that?
I was just thinking about that. I
What
think we were
airport?
in, yeah, it was Germany, I think. I remember it being Europe. And
Okay.
I remember us being stuck in an airport on a tour. And just, yeah, like someone took out a podcast of, yeah, yoga download. Let's just lead people through.
Let's do some
Yeah.
yoga on tour, TCO yoga group. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I do remember that.
so when did you find kind of these outside music, more like well-being life tools is kind of what I look at it. Like we've done a lot of examining the mindset behind music and how to let yourself be that creative, free artist. And I guess I'm just curious, when how did you seek out yoga and meditation and yoga nidra? How did they kind of come into your life? Was it like an intentional performance tool, or was it kind of something different?
I think that having a sort of Zen, without appropriating Buddhism in full. I mean, this probably just sounds way too easy, and it is for what I'm talking, but I was aware of like a Zen connection to like my internal landscape from a very, like, I think that's something that I had to find in order to make peace with nerves when I was in college, when I was at
Oh,
Curtis. I was just like, I was one of those kids who was really talented, but who, put them in front of an audience as a musician, and they're just like my knees were shaking and my mouth was drying out, and like
mm,
I felt, I don't know how aware an audience was of this, but I just internally like was quaking in my boots.
Oh.
And I had to teach myself somehow that that was okay. And also that my fix for it, which has been really like a lifelong now process. Because, like I said earlier in the podcast, it's these kinds of things that we might realize them, we might learn them once or have like a light bulb moment, but it doesn't mean we're fixed. It just means that this is something we have to practice. And so I think that the calming aspect of being in the moment and accepting what was happening in the moment is something that I taught myself how to do when I was probably like 18. And yoga specifically came up in my probably mid 20s to 30s as just a way to exercise. That's really what I was just looking at ways to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And I never thought of myself as athletic in any way. And I sort of learned about yoga. And then I understood that yoga had these elements that I was already interested in, which were like internal focus and acceptance and like being in the moment, understanding where you are when you're there. That like I was able to refresh the idea that practice was aligned with what I already wanted to be doing as a musician. So that was a really good way for me to stay in shape. And the actual meditation is something that's come along. It came along during COVID, so it's like 5 years now.
Hmm.
Um, as a steady practice, like I can honestly say that for the last 5 years I've meditated every day. And I hadn't really like learned, in spite of the fact that I've had all this sort of practice and awareness with living in the moment, the idea of what meditating was and is for me was just not something that I had really like set aside time to do. I always kind of knew that I wanted to, but it was just like another thing
Yeah, yeah.
that I right like and over COVID period during the pandemic, I went through a phase of like complete and total depression with not having, like being suddenly robbed of like everything that I was used
Right,
to
right.
and trying to figure out who I was and what I was going to do with myself. And the only thing that like helped for a while was meditating. So I started to figure out what that meant to me. And now it's just become something that I practice on a daily. And I think that a lot of my now, well, like for example, this idea that I'm able to say that I have no interest in perfection is something that has come out of the meditating. It's come out of my chosen, like I have now dedicated like a huge part of my brain to not wanting to attach really a lot of attention to my ego and to kind of teaching myself to like look at myself from an objective place and not from a personal like ego place, which is it's challenging. And it's something that, yeah, it's been going on for me regularly for about 5 years, and it's helpful.
Okay. So just specifically, if you're comfortable sharing, what kind of meditation do you do? Because there's like 5 million styles, or do you just change it up every time?
I do change when I get bored. I am also someone who has a very like strong love-hate relationship with ritual and routine.
Same, same.
And
Yep.
yeah. But I guess I would say that the thing that works for me the best is a sort of form of transcend. It's not officially transcendental meditation, but it's connected to transcendence in the sense that the focus is rather than I think in officially and transcendental, it's a mantra that you're like
Right, right.
focused in on as your object. And my version of this is audio. Actually, it's a listening. It's usually tempo bells or some
Mm.
kind of something that's not musical because I don't want to like be thinking about what it means or how it sounds or
Yep.
whether it's in tune or it's
Yep.
it's basically just sound. It could even be a buzz, but it's sound as object that I can just listen to and focus, like lift above I think it's important to say this about meditating because I think so many people, especially people who haven't started practicing it regularly, believe that what they're training themselves to do is not to think. But but really what you are, you can't not think. You will always think. And so what you're doing or what I'm trying to do when I'm practice meditating is paying attention to this object, which in my case is usually some kind of sound, like a drone type of sound. And knowing that, if I find myself thinking, if I see thoughts floating by, that I don't have to attach to them or assign them meaning. I can just kind of go back to this drone, and the steady practice of not engaging in thinking, but rather in listening is transformative. It changes the mood. It teaches me how to concentrate.
Yeah.
It teaches me again that, a lot of the crap that goes through my head is not really worth paying attention to. Um,
Thoughts are just thoughts. You don't have to buy every single thought. Did you know we have on average, oh shoot, I forget if it's 60,000 or 80,000, but it's thoughts a day. 60
yeah.
to 80,000.
And
Can you imagine buying all of those? Good Lord.
right. And I remember a statistic. I don't know what the actual number is anymore, but like a hugely high, like close to 90% of those are like the same thing over and over again. They're not even original.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not even interesting.
At least a dog, when it's hunting for a bone, knows like what it's doing. Like my brain is usually just like
Right.
hyper fixating on the thing that's completely not helpful. So, and I'm with you completely that meditation is such a fantastic tool at like detaching from not only your thoughts, but also your ego. And I think before we go into
Right.
rapid fire, I think it ties in so beautifully, kind of like with your most recent chapter of so you were on a sabbatical. You've been in the orchestra 35 years. You just took your first sabbatical, which also blows my mind. And I'm curious how much you want to kind of share about how that has that moment of stillness. Like you talked about how the pandemic was like a jarring moment of stillness. You've been going in this high pressure job, at, your words, and I can't even imagine what it would be like, and you handle it just with such grace. But so you've had, the pandemic was like a forced jarring break. And now you had the sabbatical that was like an on your terms break. What have you learned from those moments of stepping away from the performer persona that, I mean, I don't think ego, but is ego the right word in that? Like, so there's something in there about like your time off and like getting to know kind of like who you are, I guess, without the flute.
For sure. I think that is it was I think that I believed for a long time, and maybe I have had ups and downs and phases where this was true, that I didn't identify my ego, the definition of who I am with my job or with my career, with my title. But I think as an artist and as a musician, that's tricky. It's difficult to divorce your a sense of who you are from the understanding of what we do. I think as an artist, maybe more than with many other careers, professions, it's difficult because we're well, I mean, I know that I am kind of like always on. I'm always creating. I'm always thinking about how not necessarily how I can be perfect, but how I can do something better or differently, or what does this mean? How to like I'm looking constantly. I'm always searching, and my head is wrapped up in. I mean, luckily, I enjoy music, and so I think
Mhm.
about it like obsessively, and sometimes that's amazing, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's just feels
You know what's
crazy. Go
I'm sorry
ahead.
to interrupt because the other thing I was going to just point out is as into music as you are, and this was part of what I thought was interesting about your sabbatical, is that there are other things creativity wise that are not related to music that absolutely are a creative outlet for you. And I almost wonder how those help you with like doing the dance of, the ego and all those kinds of things. Like, I mean, when I look
Right.
at what you have to offer, you also like write beautifully. And you were starting to tell me, I think, at work these couple other sort of hobbies that you're into creativity wise?
Hmm.
What are you
Right.
doing?
So so I chose not to, and this was a very scary move. I chose not to have a goal for a sabbatical. In fact, I did a lot of thinking about how I was going to manage this and whether I was going to plan, whether I was going to assign an agenda, because I'm used to having, like, we're very used to knowing very clearly what our schedule is going to look like,
Right.
years in advance. And I knew that not having that was going to be difficult for me in the same way that the pandemic was. And yet I decided that the goal, if I was going to have any goal during this sabbatical, the goal was to somehow reach child's mind. It was
Like beginner's mind
that
and
was
Zen.
yeah, beginner's mind, exactly. I wanted to let go of being an expert about anything and just somehow whatever for what I don't even think I understood or taught myself what that would mean. I just said I'm going to somehow find a way to be comfortable with finding or being in that place of beginner's mind by the time the sabbatical is over. And one of the things that certainly fostered that for me was I started painting and drawing, doing visual art, which is not something that it's something that I grew up telling just like with sports, it was just, oh, I just can't do that. I'm not someone who does that. I'm not
Right.
skilled in that way.
Mhm.
And playing around with it, with paints and pens and papers, is something that I just started doing very casually. And then it sort of took hold. And I was like, I could get into flow states that were very similar to how I feel when I'm practicing. And I can't tell you that I think that the whole point, even now, is not whether I got good at it or whether I, feel like I've improved or learned anything. It's just that I am spending time doing something that I really enjoy. And I think there really are still, that's the funny thing, is that there are times when I apply that kind of inner critic to work that I'm doing that I have no skill in at all.
Mhm.
And the inner critic comes in and says, "Oh, like what a terrible watercolor." And I can be like, "Well, wait a second. How
Excuse
would
me.
how would it be good?" And so it's easier somehow not to listen to that and not to engage with it and to understand that actually it's been really fascinating to see that I will attach my brain and my energy towards other creative outlets that don't really have anything to do with music, and that are, like, equally, even without the skill, equally rewarding.
Hmm.
I can get equally lost in doing this. And yeah, writing and sketching are good examples of places where I like to spend time that are creative and that are probably actually, interestingly, less ephemeral than music tends to be. Like, you have the writing, it's still there. The sketch, it's not necessarily communicative in the same way that music is in the moment. And for that reason, it's also more permanent. It's on a piece of paper rather than just out in the air. But I think the point for me really is just that I have been able to engage with things without necessarily the need to be good at them. And that's been really interesting. And that has helped me to understand that I don't need to define myself as a flutist.
Mm. Wow. I mean, that is just you basically have just encapsulated what I know science supports. It's funny, I just actually released an episode today about sort of the science of being a whole person and how music is like 1/7 of your life. So,
Mm. Hmm.
and the way that you're describing it is exactly just, and you didn't know this, but that's, you have these other parts of your life. You're taking care of your mind and your body and your hobbies. And I know you have a beautiful relationship, and these other parts of your life help you stay grounded as a human. And then all of that interpretation helps you show up with the values that you hold so dear in music, which the highest one, which comes up 20 times today is communication. And in order for you
Hmm.
to serve and in that communication, it cannot just be about that tunnel vision approach. It has to be this kind of multi-layered thing. So I think you've had for someone who says they don't have a process, people can take away many, I don't even know how many. I wanted to stop and take notes throughout this interview because there were so many moments where I just thought this is incredibly wise and inspiring. And I'm not surprised that this is how this interview went because I'm constantly inspired by you as an artist. Before we go into, we're going to do some rapid fires. We're going to see how this goes. But I do want to give you the opportunity, actually, real quick, to talk a little bit about one final project that came up, which was your audition books. Say a little bit about
Okay.
these incredible, they're out in the world, guys. Josh will plug all his ways you can find him. But yeah, tell us a little bit about this new, talk about another creative endeavor. My goodness. You're a published
Thank
author.
you. Thank you. I'm a published author. It's a series of excerpt books called the Audition Method. And so far there is a version for clarinet and for violin and for flute. And I was asked, I think it's embarrassing to me in a way, although as soon as I say that out loud, I also say, well, why should it be? Why should it have taken any less time than it took? But I was invited to join this series by the series creators who are the clarinet player, Mark Nuccio, invented this concept. And wrote the first one, the clarinet version, and I think is reaching out to find, teachers for each one of the instruments to make this series. And so the audition method series, what's special about it is that it's not just excerpts on a page. It's a lot about process. It's a lot about so here's what's difficult about this excerpt, and here's what I do in order to make it easier for myself, or here's what I want to hear myself do. And this is how I do it. These are the exercises that I go through in order to facilitate this excerpt. And that angle of it really appealed to me. So I said yes. And that was like 8 years ago. and then it took me that long to kind of figure out how to make myself comfortable,
Yeah.
putting what I do into words, actually.
And that's like full circle. We started off with like the wordless communication, and now you're putting into words about the wordless communication. That makes total sense to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it took a while, and it was something that I did finish actually during the pandemic. And now it's just newly published. It had all of the pieces have finally come to fruition. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. I look through it and I'm like, yeah, I think this would be helpful to people in general, which says a lot, because I don't know if I said this out loud yet, but I really don't like to talk about how I do what I do, because I think that there's this very strong element of mystery and mysticism built into what I value as a musician, that as soon as I start thinking about how I do it or how to explain it, it becomes like too much of a task, too much of a, I'm going to jump through these hoops. And I reject that very strongly as a musician. So this was a particular challenge, but I think I'm happy with how it turned out. Thanks.
I mean, every flute player listening needs to go buy this book, and maybe my little viola self will buy this book because I have a feeling anything in there would be applicable. Okay, rapid fires. What are you reading right now?
I am reading The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, which it's shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year, by Kiran Desai. I can't tell you how special this book is. It's amazing. I'm going through all of I am a sucker for really good literature, and I really have always had good luck with the Booker Prize lists. And this year, there are 6 on the short list, and I'm reading the 4th one, my 4th one.
Okay.
And she's amazing. And I have to tell you that one of the things that stuck out to me in my reading, I just was reading it this morning. One of the main characters is a woman who is like young, like a senior in college and wants to become a writer. And she's reading Anna Karenina. And the feeling that she has while she's reading is of she almost can't concentrate on the book itself because the writing makes her so she gets this tingle that says, I want to become a writer. And that's how I feel when I'm reading this book.
Oh, so cool. Okay. You'll have to text me the full title after this. What are you watching right now? Show, movie? What's your like Netflix hanging with your dude?
We just finished Slow Horses, which is
I've been meaning to get into that.
It's a really, really, really good, very smart, very dark comedy, but definitely fun British spy
Oh, okay.
action. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you listen to podcasts often, but if you do, what is your top podcast you're listening to right now? And if not, pivot to music.
I don't listen to podcasts regularly, but my two favorite, like the things I listen to the most regularly would be Tara Brach lectures and the New York Times book review.
Oh, amazing. Tara Brach has just been such a staple in my life. All her books. Oh, she's incredible. Favorite meal?
Nachos that I make.
Okay, I was not expecting homemade nachos. Now I'm going to come over and eat your nachos. And finally, something that always cheers you up.
My dog.
Yeah. I just saw your puppy last week. So sweet.
Going outside with my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pets are the best.
Yeah.
Speaking of the best, that is you. Joshua Smith, tell all the people where they can find you. Where are your socials? How can they buy your book? Where can they hear you? You're also Grammy-nominated, so go listen to every single album this genius is on. I have listened to all your albums. I'm not even kidding. Throughout the years, I've just had them playing. So anyway, plug away, my friend.
Thank you. I do very little posting, but when I do, it's on Instagram, Joshua Solo Flute. And I do have a website, soloflute.com.
And that's where they can buy your book? Your books.
That's where they can.
Plural.
The books are definitely linked to from there, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, my friend, I'm so incredibly grateful. This flew by. I was watching the clock like, oh gosh, we could just keep going. But thank you for your time, for your wisdom.
I'm happy to do more.
Well, part 2, folks. Part 3, part 4. We have our regular guest now. Yeah, we'll do this again, Josh. I appreciate you so very much. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mindful Opus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider adding the show to your library, write a blurb in the review section, or share it with someone in your circle. For more about my work, you can find me on Instagram at mindfulopus or my website, mindfulopus.com. And while you're there, don't forget to grab that free well-being resource waiting for you. Until next time, my fellow opus creator, keep creating the life you want, one opus at a time.